Hello there. Welcome to our next installment of the tragic case of Andreas Deja. In our previous episode, we followed our young hero through his beginnings in Germany, his life at the Disney studios, and his projects leading him to this moment. He is now primed to enter the peak of his villain arc. Will he succumb to the evil, or will he have a change of heart? Let's find out. Before we start, don't forget to check out our Discord, our coffee page, and like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell, all the things. It really helps us out.
You want me to throw her father into the asylum unless she agrees to marry you? Oh, that is despicable. I love it.
Well, to be honest, the villains in most cases are more interesting characters to animate because villains motivate a story. They want things their way. They want to change things. It's like the prince and the princess. They just want to have everything nice and beautiful and live happily ever after, and you don't have a story there, you know. But the villains, they want to mess things up, and they want to take power. They want to get the power, you know, and again have things their way. So those are usually characters that are eccentric, that have broad mannerisms, facial expressions, where you can go a lot further with the acting because they often have tempers, you know. So there's a big range in terms of the acting. While with what we call the straight characters, the princes and the princesses, you have to be much more subtle with those kinds of things and careful with the drawing. They have to look nice, you know, and even the acting is subdued and real. But with villains, you can go to town. Gaston was probably the most difficult character of all of them because of the realism involved. I thought of him early on as, well, the villain, of course, and I drew him like a villain with a big jaw and a mustache, you know, and oversized muscles and all that, and because he was the villain. And I remember when management saw the early animation I had done for the film, they said, well, the animation looks good, but he doesn't look handsome enough. And I said, handsome? He's the villain. And they kind of left it at that. And I remember our then boss, Jeffrey Katzenberg, after 2 weeks, he knew that I was messing with the whole idea of a handsome villain. And he called me into his office and he said, look, he said, the theme that we're trying to tell here with Beauty and the Beast is really don't judge the book by its cover. Meaning, when we see the Beast in the movie for the first time, he is ferocious and he's really scary. But you find out throughout the story slowly that he really inside, he has a heart of gold and is a good guy. And Gaston has the absolute opposite qualities. We see him, he's a real handsome dude. He probably should marry Belle. He's sort of the hero type. But we find out, not is he a male chauvinist, he's full of himself, and he even becomes a murderer at the end of the film. So again, the opposite quality. So because the Beast is ugly, Gaston had to be handsome. And I remember telling Katzenberg, yeah, but handsome characters are so much more difficult to animate. You know what he said? He said, nobody said it was going to be easy. You got to play not like the straight guy, but you have sneak in somehow some eccentric qualities to make him interesting. If he just moves like a real person, you know, with no exaggeration at all, then it's flat and it's lifeless. So I snuck some facial expressions that were a little eccentric, you know, whatever I could do. So you're kind of walking the fine line, making him interesting looking and expressive without making him look ugly. So because of that, I would say he was the most difficult character to animate. Rewarding though, because you want to be able to do something like that too. You know, you just want to be pinned as the villain, as the typical villain guy. He was sort of a unique villain.
Deja designed Gaston as manly and good-looking in appearance, but gave him expressions that show someone who isn't warm-hearted and is pretty cocky as well as insecure. Gaston expertly shows character, personality, and motivation through walks, gestures, and poses.
Marry the shrew.
I become the Sultan?
The idea has merit.
Yes, merit, yes!
And
Yeah.
so anyway, so after I was done with Gaston, which was a balancing act of giving him a range of expressions, but keeping him real and realistic, with Jafar, I thought, not here, not on this one. This one, I'm going to go crazy and caricature his face and set his mouth very low in the overall head so I can have some fun with bizarre mouth shapes and just really play. When I think about a character like Jafar, I gave him this strange face. It looks like a mask, but yet it has lips and it forms words, and I could be very inventive with the way he talked. If you remember, he has these big shoulder pieces on his costume, and I made them extra wide as a place for his parrot like a stage set sort of for his parrot, Iago. And so the bird could walk up and down his shoulder, basically. And then Jafar could just hold still, but his mouth could talk to the parrot over there. And his mouth could talk, his lips could move over there. I mean, there was so much fun to be had with that character because he had such an eccentric, caricature look to him. It started with Eric Goldberg, who was the first animator on it, who, of course, did the genie stuff. And then his hook was Al Hirschfeld, the cartoonist from New York, who has this linear graphic style. So we just all had to follow Eric's lead in that and make sure that our shape and line language in our drawings and designs really fit what Eric had started. So we didn't do a lot of planes and like that chiseled look that you sometimes can end up with. We try to unify form and shape and come up with something simpler and more graphic.
If only I had gotten that lamp.
I will have the power to get rid of you.
Oh, to think we gotta keep kissing up to that chump and his chump daughter for the rest of our lives.
No, Iago. Only until she finds a chump husband. Then she'll have us banished. Or beheaded.
With Jafar, Andreas made one of the most brilliant and important decisions of character handling and conception done by a supervising animator ever. Originally in the storyboards, Jafar was portrayed as far more of an irritable, short-tempered villain, much like the typical Disney villain would be. However, most of the characters in Aladdin were very cartoony, flamboyant, and outgoing. This made Deja feel it would be better if he made Jafar more restrained and calm in characterization, giving a good sense of contrast between him and the other characters. In terms of design, not only does Jafar have very red clothing and a fiery look that represents evil in comparison to the blue clothing worn by most of the good characters, but his design is very angular and stylized, contrasted to the roundness of the other characters. What makes him so scary in the film is that Deja animates him in a way that has him very restrained both in movement and in emotion shown, and giving him a very psychological thought process as well as using subtle gestures and menacing expressions to communicate his true feelings and thoughts to the audience.
Gazim was obviously less than worthy.
Oh, there's a big surprise! That's an incredible... I think I'm gonna have a heart attack and die from that surprise! What are we gonna do? We got a big problem here, a big...
Yes. Only one may enter. I must find this diamond in the rough.
One of the biggest inspirations when animating Jafar was Mark Davis's animation on Maleficent. What I took from Maleficent for Jafar was the understatement of the acting, explained Andreas. He actually knew Davis very well for many years, and the respect was mutual. There's a lot of learning process going on there, said Mark Davis in a 1996 interview. There are a few very, very good animators, and one I particularly enjoy is Andreas Deja.
Yeah, be prepared. Yeah, we'll be prepared. For what?
For the death of the king.
Is he sick?
No, fool, we're gonna kill him. And Simba, too.
By the time I was finished with Jafar, which was my second villain, and we were starting on Lion King and nobody was cast yet in terms of the animation, I thought, well, it's probably going to be somebody else's turn to do the villain because I had done two, obviously. And so looking around, maybe I should ask to do Simba, or the hyenas would be kind of fun to do. And then word got around the studio that the actor Jeremy Irons had just been hired to voice Scar. And I had a chance to listen to some of his early recordings. And I was like, oh, no. I have to do this. So how do I even ask? Because I had just done 2 bad guys. I cannot ask for a third one. That's like selfish or whatever, you know. And but I thought I have to ask. So I went into the director's room and I said, you guys, I know I already have done 2 bad guys, but when I listened to those early tracks by Jeremy Irons, I was just closing my eyes, and there's something that just happened. I could see it. And I could feel it. And as I was going on and on about it, they said, well, we kind of had you in mind the whole time to do this character.
So they just let you go on and gush about it, even though they're like, oh, you've already got the job, but go ahead and tell us what you want.
Shut up, you got it. You know? We also did do a lot of research for Lion King. You know, we went to all the local zoos, San Diego, LA, went behind the scenes, got close to the animals. We even had lions in the studio in our conference room. There's a farm just outside of LA that trains animals for movies and music videos, and so these are hopefully tame lions, you know, tame animals. They brought them into a conference room, and it was just a guy, and I remember the big lion had a chain around his neck, and what it really did to me anyway is like they're even bigger than you thought they would be, because when you see a lion at a zoo, it's at a safe distance, far away under a tree, and there's your lion. But when they come into your environment, it's like there's an office chair, and you know there's a table, and there's a lion. You can't even open up your arms wide enough to show you how big how wide their mane is in their head. They're humongous. When they were walking, the most amazing thing is what the shoulders do. When the weight shifts from one leg to the other, that particular shoulder will go shoot way up.
Right.
And the beautiful shoulder play. I needed to have that in Scar, but then I thought, where can you see his shoulders? His mane is all right there.
Yeah.
So I cut that way down, so the shoulders are always in front of the mane, so I could still show that graphically. It was really important to me. The one character where I think I started from scratch was Scar, because the initial thought about Lion King was, well, maybe we should style the characters after some African art. Let's look at some African masks and combine that with anatomy that we had studied of real lions. So I did this very stylized version of Jafar. I have that drawing still somewhere, based on an African mask, but it became so stylized that you couldn't really change a lot in terms of flexibility or range of expression. It became that one mask, you know, that looked like an African scar. And then we deviated from that. And then the question was, well, then what is it? What is the style? And it sort of evolved. But if I recall, I was always for him having a scar. The question was, where would that scar be? And I remember us having a meeting, like, where is Scar meeting? And
and that's how Disney is. You have those kind of meetings.
Exactly. And so the idea was, well, it could be over his upper arm on one side, it could be on his back, and I believe it was me, not to really praise myself here, but I thought, well, if it's in his face somewhere, then you see it in close-ups and in long shots. If it's on his body sometimes, then you wouldn't see it in close-ups. So then I said, well, maybe we can do it over one of his eye units. Like he got it during a fight, like in one claw maybe went over the eye unit, just barely missing the eyeball, but hitting the eyebrow.
Is acting this out. So
and the cheekbone. Well, yeah. That's who we are. Actors with a pencil. And anyway, so it sort of came out kind of weird because you have a scar on top of his eyeball and the bottom of his eyeball, but graphically that's the area where I could fit that in. I try to do the opposite of what happened with Shere Khan. When you look at Shere Khan's face, it's very horizontal.
Yes.
There's that big wide jaw. It's very much this, right?
Which is George Sanders looks like that.
With this of George Sanders.
Right.
And Scar is more like this, which is also more Jeremy Irons.
Exactly. And they use their expressions as actors the same way that one was very wide, one was very long in their acting choices.
I mean, I really had studied Jungle Book and all the characters and knew how they did big cats in that movie, and I thought I probably shouldn't look at it anymore while I'm working on Lion King, just look at real lions, look at Jeremy Irons, and let that sort of influence you. So that's what basically happened. So from an acting point of view, it was such a great challenge, and but also a challenge from the point of view that it was a four-legged animal, because before that I'd always done straight up characters. I mean, even Roger Rabbit is not a four-legged rabbit; it's just like a cartoon rabbit, sort of humanized. And the characters in the Black Hole that I did were humans. So this was one on four legs, so I couldn't use gestures, the hands or paws to do that. I snuck it in a few scenes, because when you have a close-up, you could lift the paw and he could do that. Like roll his paw. You couldn't do it in a long shot, because when you see the whole body, it looks funny, but you could do it in a close-up once in a while. So very limited in terms of gestures, and you have to be much more careful in terms of what angle you use for the head or the overall body. Language becomes really important, because you just don't have hands. Because Jeremy Irons made that lion, the character, intelligent, and the mix of intelligence and villainy is really dangerous. What a voice, And Jeremy Irons is really one of those actors who can make anything sound important and rich and wonderful. And I kept saying this in those days. You probably heard me saying this, but he could read the Burbank phone book, and I would want to animate that. I mean, that's how good he is. He just has a way of making dialogue sound unusual, interesting, and really character-rich. So there wasn't one scene with Scar where I was thinking, now I could play it like this, or I could play it like that, or I could do this. It was always like, got it. And you just knew how to play this because it was so clear because of his voice. We went over and recorded it near Covent Garden. I remember there was a little studio, and something really funny happened. Well, the first thing happened that time was the first time where I showed him some pencil animation of Scar. I brought a tape with me. I said, I'm going to show him. I just animated the whole setup before the Stampede, where Scar is telling him, stay there, your father's a marvelous surprise for you. And I just wanted to show him the animation. I didn't know what he would expect, so it was a little unnerving. But I popped the tape in, and he looked at the monitor, and he says, oh my God, he does look like me, and he did this. And I said, well, that was sort of intentional,
Yeah.
So he enjoyed that.
And he's pretty, so I mean, that's what, Scar is kind of seductive.
But there's certain mouth British things that I just stole from his face.
And also the way he has these slightly almond, very dramatic eyes that Scar has.
So it was just funny that he saw that too, But the other funny thing that happened during that recording session, well, it wasn't funny then, but we did the whole run through, and he did brilliant. He did a beautiful job of reading the lines. And then the sound engineer comes on, he said, guys, we have an issue here. We go, what? And he played a few takes back, and there was this just going through the track. And what it wasn't him trying to be a lion, it was his stomach.
Oh, I know.
And he said, I didn't have lunch, I'm going to have an early dinner with my wife here, and I'm so sorry, and we couldn't use any of it. Completely. So they ordered pizza, cookies, some fruit for him to just eat, and settle his tummy down, and then he did the whole thing over again, just as well, or even better. But funny things happen like that.
Why, if it isn't my big brother descending from on high to mingle with the commoners.
Sarabi and I didn't see you at the presentation of Simba.
That was today? Oh, I feel simply awful. Must have slipped my mind.
Yes, well, as slippery as your mind is, as the king's brother, you should have been first in line.
Well, I was first in line. Until the little hairball was born.
That hairball is my son, and your future king.
Oh, I shall practice my curtsy.
The animator deals with a lot of real, powerful emotions he puts into the character. Resentment, jealousy, a desire for power and attention, a complete lack of sensitivity and honesty, and most of all, a full embrace for being evil. However, in the scenes where he's talking to young Simba, he is more restrained and appears bored and insincere, making the story very believable.
Hey, Uncle Scar, guess what?
I despise guessing games.
I'm gonna be king of Pride Rock.
Oh, goody.
My dad just showed me the whole kingdom, and I'm gonna rule it all.
Yes. Well, forgive me for not leaping for joy. Bad back, you know.
And there you have it. Deja's absolutely amazing performances imbue his characters with insanity, tyranny, and elegance. His movements and expressions are so impressive, freeze-framing any scene in these movies will prove to be extremely interesting. As for Deja's villain arc, it is over. It's time for someone else to pick up the reins. In our next episode, we'll explore Deja's redemption arc. Stay tuned. Thank you to these people for supporting us on Patreon and Ko-fi. And if you want to make sure this channel sticks around, you can check out our Ko-fi link in the description. Every bit helps. Thank you for watching this episode of Discographies. Click the thumbs up button below if you liked it. And if you want to be notified when the next episode comes out, consider subscribing and hitting the bell. Comment below with characters you would like to see us cover. Further reading and references are linked below. We hope to see you in another Discography.